Here we are with Chapter 8, Greek Civilization, Greek Culture. So remember, in your textbook, the green textbook, page 212 will start the information dealing with Greek culture. So we've been talking about Greek wars, the Persians, the Athenians, the Spartans, the Peloponnesian War, all of that. But remember, this is about really some of the things that the Greeks have given the world. So you were to write down some of the vocabulary that you found on those pages, starting on page 212. Take a moment to maybe pause the video to see if you have the right definition for these vocabulary words: ritual, oracle, oral tradition, fable, drama, tragedy, and comedy. So remember, the oracle is the sacred shrine where priest or priestesses spoke for a god or goddess. So we'll talk about that more in a moment, but one of the number one things that people miss is they have a hard time with drama, tragedy, comedy. Remember, a tragedy is a Greek drama where the characters struggle and can't overcome it. A comedy is also a type of drama, which we don't typically think of that, but technically a comedy is a type of drama with a happy ending. So it's not necessarily one that will make you laugh all the time, like when you think of a play or a movie today. When you think about the ancient Greeks, a comedy was a Greek drama that had a happy ending. So pause this if you need to check your vocabulary now. As we dig into some of the Greek arts, you'll hopefully be seeing these all around you. Like, it's really hard to live in the United States today and not see the connection. The Greeks are everywhere. Their fingerprints are everywhere, especially when we think about the arts, whether we're talking about paintings or, in this case, these famous Greek pottery, the vases. But as we mentioned, theater. The Greeks have given the world theater. So here are some famous Greek theater masks that you might wear in a drama. And again, these were designed to over accentuate your facial features, because remember, when you're in a Greek drama, whether it's a comedy or a tragedy, you would be in an amphitheater like this famous one that you'd find in Greece today. And you can see by looking at the picture here, this how big it is. Just thousands and thousands of people could sit. And even the way the Greeks designed the acoustics, the way that the sound comes up through the amphitheater, you could hear the people in the play very well. And of course, you wore the mask so that you could see their facial features even from far away. That's why the mask looks so strange to us, but from far distance, they wouldn't look that strange. You would be able to tell the emotion that they were trying to convey: sadness, happiness, excitement, anger. So the Greeks really did give the world theater. Everything that we know about television and movies, Broadway in New York City, all of this has its roots really in the Greeks. They did it perhaps better than anyone in the ancient world. So if you look at this amphitheater, you can just see how seriously they took it. They realized it was an important way to tell a story, convey a message, to entertain yourselves. You can also see some of the background here of what modern day Greece looks like, kind of rolling, rugged hills. But this amphitheater still stands today, even after all these years, thousands and thousands of years later. You've already talked about some of the Greek gods and goddesses, and we've mentioned in class that Apollo, being the sun god, is the god of many things, but mostly light, poetry, the sun. Remember, the Greeks saw Apollo as the god who would pull the sun across the sky. So for them, he was one of the important gods. And if you were to go to his temple in Delphi, as you see on this map, the red arrow is pointing to Delphi. At his temple, the temple to Apollo in Delphi, is where you would find the most famous oracle in the Greek world. The Greeks believed Delphi to be the center of the Greek world, the center of the universe. Zeus is to have released two eagles on opposite ends of the universe, and they met at Delphi. So today, if you were to see what's left of the temple of Apollo where the oracle was, this is what it would look like today. But remember, people would come and perhaps try to get a glimpse of what their future held They would pour a little water on a goat, and if the goat would shudder, then they could hear from the priestess. It was very complicated and very, I would say, indirect, or maybe the meanings were very vague. So not everyone knew exactly what they should do when they left here. Whether you're a world leader or a leader from another part of Greece or another country, this could be confusing, but everybody wanted to know their future. And it is kind of a bit of a interesting thing. If you know how your future will turn out, would you do things to possibly change how your future turns out? We mentioned in class the author Homer, and how he'd written about the wars between Greece and Troy. His two most famous books are epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the Iliad is really about the Trojan War. Remember, Homer wrote this hundreds of years, 700, 800 years after what we think went down between Troy and Greece. So a lot of it's mythology. There might have been a war, but of course the idea of a golden apple and the goddesses fighting over that golden apple, this is all mythology. But was there a queen named Helen? Was there a prince named Paris? I don't know. But the idea is it's supposed to teach us a story. So the story goes that Paris steals Helen away from Greece, takes her back to Troy. And she's said to be so beautiful that the Greeks will come after her. They will launch 1,000 ships to get her back. And when the Greeks arrive, they bring with them some great warriors. Perhaps the greatest warrior is Achilles. So Achilles is the Greek, and he will take on the Trojan warrior Hector. And these two will battle it out, and really the story is epic in how they would battle it out. Now, of course, you know that Achilles, according to the mythology, was dipped in the river Styx, and so he was invulnerable, really, except for that one part where his mother held on to him, and he would later die in this war by Paris. Will shoot an arrow in his weakness, in his weak spot. Achilles will kill Hector during this scene that you see here and drag his body around Troy as a way to anger the Trojans. So it's not a very friendly war, right? I mean, they're really brutal with each other. But this fighting will go on for 10 years. Greece will not be able to get inside the city walls of Troy. That's when Odysseus comes up with the idea to give the Trojans a giant trophy and hide the Greeks inside the horse. Once the Trojans think the Greeks have gone home, they pull the trophy inside, have a big party, and the Greeks sneak out and open the gates and will win the Trojan War. So the Greeks inside the horse sneak out, open the gate. The Greeks who are hiding outside the gate now can come in, and they attack all the Trojans and win the war. Homer's book or poem, The Odyssey, is really about Odysseus trying to get home and how he has angered Poseidon. And Poseidon will not let Odysseus get back to his wife in Greece. So Odysseus is where we get the word Odyssey. So maybe you'll learn more about that in language arts. But let's talk about architecture as well. When you think about what the Greeks have given the world, they've given us this idea of symmetry and Greek columns, and the capital part, which is the part at the top of this building. This is the U.S. Supreme Court building. You can see that it has like that triangle at the top. That's a Greek architectural design, along with the frieze, the people that are carved in it. So this is a replica of the Parthenon. The original Parthenon is in Athens, of course, up on the hill. But this is a replica that's found in Nashville, Tennessee. And it gives you an idea of what the Parthenon would have looked like in its glory in Athens. And you can see the people standing next to it, the size and scope of it. But with the columns and the frieze at the top of that, front of that Parthenon. But the Greeks have given us this idea of columns. And so you might need to pause here if you want to look at these closely. But the Doric column is pretty basic. The Ionic column is kind of mid-level. It's got a little bit of fancy at the top. And of course, the fanciest of all is the Corinthian, meaning it came from Corinth. So you can see that it's got like flowery marbles sculpted at the top to look like flowers and petals. But remember, these are all made out of marble. Here's another view of the types of columns: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. So the basic, the middle of the road is Ionic, and Corinthian is the fanciest. Of course, would be the hardest to make. So as you think about architecture around us, think about the influence that the Greeks have had on the Western world, the United States. Some of our government buildings, many of them have the Greek vibe going. They've got the temples, temple feel to it, and the columns. And many of them will have the Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian. Also, the Greeks have given us this idea about thinking. We don't always, at least not when we're younger, think about the idea of thinking, but the Greeks were really good at thinking about thinking. And the most famous of these thinkers, right, we call someone who thinks all the time about life and about the meaning of life, we call them philosopher. Perhaps the greatest thinker and philosopher that the Greeks have given the world would be Socrates. Right? He lived and taught in Athens around 399 BC. He believed in an absolute truth, right or wrong. He was a very powerful teacher. You'll maybe even deal with some Socratic methods named after Socrates in some of your language arts classes. His method of teaching in the Socratic method is by asking questions. But he asked so many questions, and he had so many people thinking, the young people thinking in Athens, that some people were scared of Socrates. They thought he was dangerous. They thought he was filling young people's minds with crazy thoughts, and they didn't like the fact that he was teaching young people to be thinkers and to question authority and to question what life was all about. And so Socrates was given a choice by the leaders of Athens during his day: either stop teaching or you can drink this poison. And of course, this is a famous painting of Socrates deciding that he is not going to quit teaching. He'd rather drink the poison, the hemlock, that you see him reaching for here. And all of his friends are upset because they just say, hey, just if you would just quit teaching, then you could live. But Socrates was so committed to teaching that he would not stop, even if it meant his own death. So Socrates is the OG thinker and philosopher of ancient Greece. But there are others, right? Plato, he's also a big thinker. He was a student of Socrates. He started an academy in Athens. He wrote a book about kind of government and wise kings. This book is called The Republic. You might even read that in class, not in 7th grade probably, but maybe when you get to high school. And he distrusted the people. He is also an advocate for women's rights in a time when this really wasn't popular. So Plato was one of those original thinkers. So Socrates, Plato, and then of course Plato's student is Aristotle. So it's a chain: Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle. He's a big thinker, writing tons of books, starts schools. He's always thinking about science as well, like how do we classify animals and plants in this world. So he's trying to figure out the world we live in, a system to classify animals, plants. He also thought about government. So some of these thinkers think about everything. He wrote a book called Politics, thinking about, do we have a monarchy? Is that the best? Or oligarchy, where a few people rule? Or do we like a democracy where everybody has a say in their government? And of course, his most famous student would be Alexander the Great, not really known as a thinker, but a general who would create a Greek empire that we'll be talking about soon. So again, Socrates, the first, the original, Plato, and then Aristotle. Those three are the most famous Greek thinkers. They just thought about everything. All life under the sun, they thought about it. But there are other famous thinkers who were very specific in what they thought about. Your book mentions Herodotus. He was really the first person to think about history as something you should study. History is a discipline. So one of the original history thinkers was Herodotus, or Herodotus, however you'd like to say it. And of course, maybe you've heard about Pythagoras in math class, and he thought about math all the time. And his theorem today, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, this idea that math is everywhere and is really needed, we can thank Pythagoras, one of the ancient Greek math thinkers. And of course, if you ever become a doctor, you're going to have to take the Hippocratic Oath, which is named after Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine. He believed that people were sick or got sick not because they were being punished from the gods or by the gods, but something was going on in their bodies. And so today, he's still the original kind of medical thinker that we look to from ancient Greece. So the Greeks have given the world so much. Their culture, everything from theater to architecture to thinking, mythology, math, medicine, history, all of this we thank the Greeks for.